2, 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to Ruski Amir, to another evening of our literary salon. And tonight we are honoured to have David Parry here, going to do some readings and talk about his book, Grammar of Witchcraft. He's a very unique person, quite accomplished writer, organises performances, director, plays, currently involved very much with Azerbaijan and booked to go to the Eurovision Song Contest this year, not in the capacity of a singer, but as an honoured guest. So, without more ado,
fighting a coffee machine.
without more ado, over to you, David.
Thank you, Andrew. As I say, all this is very last minute because it was meant to be somebody else, so my apologies for a lack of organisation and the fact I'm incredibly tired. I need to say a couple of things I think about this book before I begin. This came out a number of years ago. It's my second book. It came out in '09. It's prose poetry. It was actually written by my alter ego Caliban. He is a very angry person, okay? I am not particularly an angry person, I hope not. This book traces what I felt was an incomplete story. Shakespeare talks about Caliban in his last play, The Tempest. Caliban is a short magical monster, the son of a witch, hence the grammar of witchcraft. That's why. Shakespeare has him going back to Milan with Prospero the Duke. I always felt that was really an inadequate way of leaving that character. He's an extraordinary character. He goes all the way back to the Bronze Age. He's also in the poetry of Browning, and Browning makes him a bit of a milksop, and I didn't really like that. So I thought, let's ask ourselves what happened to Caliban next. What sort of things would he do? I hope I resolve that in 2 books, and that's the last. I'm saying goodbye to Caliban. It's like a bereavement. Goodbye, Caliban. Oh my God. Because I think that's as far as the project goes, but it was quite tough saying goodbye to him. I'm going to change the rules of the literary salon by reading from the back. At the back of this book is a selective glossary. I wanted to use a few words in their original sense and in their sort of magical, imaginative sense. I thought that was important. Let's take the word grimoire. A grimoire, for those of you into the imaginative arts, into black magic and so on, will understand that as a spell book, a book of incantations where wizards and witches call upon evil entities. It's actually only the French word for grammar, of course. That's all it means. And I thought, let's play around with that a little. So I've used one of the original meanings of the word grimoire here for the book. Although the French word for grammatology, it is also a book detailing the textual methods of notation by which the great northern scholar Saxo Grammaticus, that's where we get the word grammar from, initially developed his semantics of witchcraft. These days, such imagist volumes usually take the form of black and white vellum manuals and are occasionally used for ethno-ritual purposes. Let's look at something more strange. I was saying to my new friend there, what is poetry? What is poetry nowadays? Why do people write poetry? Nobody reads it. Everyone thinks they can write it, but nobody reads it. There's an irony for a start. And everybody writes bad poetry, which is another irony. Oh, I love you, come back to me. Oh, whatever, yeah. Because it's not from the heart, it's from a convention. It's not from the heart. I will die unless you return. I am hurting. That's poetry. Poetry. The act of beautifying conversation and prose through the use of imagery and rhythm to enrich communication. It is consequently the highest literary process, historically adept at using lexical items to unlock the doors of textual cogitation, cognition in the other one, in order to express the realities of the world in depth. Derrida is indeed correct in pointing out that originally there was a cultural resistance to writing iconic stanzas down on papyrus. due to the perceived sanctity of living oral imagism. His idea is if you write something down, you've killed it. I hate you! The minute that that's written down, the emotion's gone. So his idea is we've got to keep things performed, spoken, interactive. The Greeks thought that as well. Plato said, writing is pharmaction, poison. Don't write it down, tell people what you think and feel. That's poetry. This is a collection of prose poetry and actual poems. What I'm going to do is read extracts. Obviously, to read the whole thing will take too long. It is not the sort of work I do nowadays, and so when I was reading this on the way here, it seemed like something literally somebody else had written, and it seemed to belong to a different time. And also Caliban says things I would never say, and he thinks things I would never think, and that makes it even more of a strange volume now. It's something I can't really get back into, but it's still, I believe, saying a lot about what poetry is, what people are, and where we're going and where we're not going. I'll begin with my first poem, Decay. Decay's flavour confounds every reason, either confuses or confounds in the inferno of forgotten lies, where sinister airs under all good spirit, so discord disguised as dissent, between natural neighbours, between books, between innocent souls in midsummer grief, first crushed and quelled by sad circumstance, then pugnaciously cast in dystopian scenes, which arena each fist as a victim's defence, as a blood-stained cousin to the thunder, and rival to the reddening earth. Yet forgetful that in the enormity of being, hidden glories still dwarf each tragic event, with bright transcendent light, with sound, with tribal regeneration, and with drying dust and frozen ashes under our icy northern footfalls. Caliban just feels a sense of loss. He doesn't feel a sense of gain. The first chapter I'm not going to read because it's too long. It's called Wishbones and Weasels, and it's all to do with people he doesn't like. And I thought that actually it's just simply too long. So what I'm going to do for the sake of the salon this evening is read the second poem, then the second chapter. This was Caliban thinking about Byron. We recently went to a Belarusian, the Belarusian embassy was very, very kind in inviting Gruntless Theatre to a performance of quite traditional drama, and I noticed the Belarusian ambassador mentioned Byron, a deeply misunderstood poet. Now he's always the sign of the rebel. Actually, it's more complicated than that. He didn't see himself as a rebel. He was an aristocrat. Aristocrats don't want to depose themselves. They want to keep hold of their castles and their money. So, yes and no with Byron. Caliban on Byron. The werewolf. Beware the werewolf and his ways, once said a woodsman's wife. For poppy seeds flower between his teeth when the moon shines weird and white. And once bitten by this loathsome beast, only madness inflames the mind, as his poetry sings in blood possessed by the rhythm of romantic rhyme. By the rhythm of romantic rhyme, my dear, by the rhythm of romantic rhyme, only lunacy crowns a belligerent brow with the rhythm of romantic rhyme. So as the sunshine lights the day, give thanks to bright heaven above. Then another cold night has passed away without the werewolf falling in love. Aristocrats don't want to lose their money. The first law of real life. Caliban is tired of being angry. Caliban believes there's more to his life than being angry. Have you noticed how angry London is nowadays? I saw this morning, I'm invigilating at the university every morning at the moment. Why can't students stop cheating? They're grown adults. Stop it, you're embarrassing yourself and indeed us, right? But that's another story. Why do they get angry when they're caught cheating? That's not the sort of anger that worries me. A pregnant woman being pushed off the tube, that worries me. Is this what we've all come to? Caliban didn't see that, I only saw it this morning. But he was aware that there's more to life than being angry. Okay. This is called a dialogue between crows. Now let me contextualise this a little. He's been invited to a lesbian wedding in Liverpool. Years ago I was invited to a lesbian wedding in Liverpool. It was delightful. Champagne everywhere, lots of chocolates. Incredible. And certain things happened in real life, which I'll explain afterwards, which made me think this is genuinely odd. Not the people inside the church, the people around the church. It's genuinely odd. We'll go for it. The same-sex service was to be held at St. Breda's. I couldn't resist the irony. St. Breda's is an actual church, by the way. A third irony. As a guest from out of town, Caliban had been given a highly detailed map and advised to get a cab. He was meant to be looking for the only Methodist church feeling magnanimous to officially celebrate this type of union. For fuck's sake! He swears I don't. Okay. For fuck's sake! This made no sense to him at all, since the idea behind every type of marriage seemed rather similar. Change necessitates choice. No matter what sexual orientation a person had, getting a partner implied that everything in life would be different and doubled. It was an undeserved blessing, as well as a crippling curse. There's never a blessing without a curse, I think. In some mystical sense, the couple become part of a single uncoordinated whole, which is inevitably more than the sum of its individual parts. Years previously, he had read that when a man and woman make love, they become an angel. No doubt. But gay lovers in particular bond closely on a subtle physical level. From experience, Caliban knew when two tough male bodies held each other down, they formed a clenched demigod. A man greater than Hercules could ever be on his own. As men, they locked themselves into a four-armed, four-legged miracle of flesh. Three girls, therefore, actively evolve into a 12-limbed love goddess. His cabbie had never heard of the church, or at least said he hadn't. So Caliban kept reading the map despite his directional sense always being crap under pressure. Anxiously, he looked out of a dirty window, admiring the unexpectedly leafy suburbs, as well as the opulent colours of the brickwork. I think we turn left at the next crossroads. I can't do a Liverpudlian accent, so do forgive me, I'm not even going to try. What's that you said, mate? Left at the crossroads, then up the hill. Sorted! The clock is ticking away, tick, tick, tick. The cabbie inadvertently twitched his ferret nose, wiping away a rivulet of drool with long, sticky fingers. I think that's a very Welsh view of Liverpudlians, but there we are. Cool. Caliban hated saying cool, along with the entire kitsch vocabulary surrounding emphatic expletives. An old crow with obsidian eyes suddenly flew across the road and hid somewhere above a parked Ford Fiesta. Just out of sight, feathers then frantically flapped with all the semblance and the seeming of an omen. Turning a corner, the cab drove closely towards the sound. Caliban saw a younger bird standing above the prostrate body of its older rival, plucking at the former's defeated plumage. An extremely bad esoteric correspondence. Every witch knows that there are clearly times when signs and portents bubble up from the very depths of existence. During the Glorious Revolution, we did actually have a revolution in this country, I'm going to write about it at some point. During the Glorious Revolution, we were painfully aware that some auguries could testify against us. Black Shug the demon dog, that's actually taken from the witch trials. Black Shug the demon dog could speak gospel truth when it suited him. Although consensus held Norfolk cats of every colour would hold their tongues. Witches such as Agnes Waterhouse, she was an actual witch, she got, so you're a witch, we're hanging you! Poor old Agnes. Witches such as Agnes Waterhead also claimed that consorting with toads proved equally reliable. She noted these creatures would often become familiar imps, or in other words, forbidden bestial lovers. Indeed, before her hanging, the pleasure she received from these love pygmies had become almost legendary. Caliban's familiar was a monkey. His name was Mike. The almanac sworn witches against monkeys, but they had been instantly attracted to each other. Mike was a huge muscular boy, 6 foot 3 inches tall, hazel-eyed and really hairy. He wore tight khaki shorts to show off his butt, that's a quote. Complemented by a white tank top, that's true, isn't that awful taste? There was a heated chemistry between them from the beginning, despite the obvious fact that the monkey was afraid of him. Like every other witch, Caliban suckled one of these imps. He fed him through a supernumerary nipple, marking the dwarf's genetic superiority over heterosexuals. In the past, our enemies would search for hidden teats all over our bodies with their prying, sensual hands. Don't trust the witch finders. They tended to claim these unnatural protuberances, women's breasts, for example. Oh, disgraceful! All in the records, look yourself. Unnatural protuberances were completely insensitive to pain and incapable of bleeding. If you bled to death, you were innocent. Shortly before torturing us, perhaps nothing really changes. As Caliban sat in the back seat looking for local landmarks, he noticed the shadow of Matthew Hopkins. I hope that man is burning in hell forever. If anyone deserves to, he really does. And the shade of Charles Fort sitting opposite him, arguing about oracles and imps. From beneath his wide-rimmed hat, the lean and looming witchfinder general was horrified by these happenings. He stroked his long grey nose and he uttered under his thin breath, "Phenomenology or witchcraft? I, sir, see not the difference. You like these bizarre and monstrous events because you are a limb of Satan yourself, Mr. Fort." Glowing with a genial light, Fort's plump spirit shone with an even greater luminosity than usual. He responded by saying, "Oh, come, come, what witchcraft? Creative nature serenades us men at every moment. I have heard that in the forests of England there have been times when stones were known to give good counsel, and brooks have babbled with satirical comments. Chaucer must have heard this on his travels, as well as Ben Jonson when he trod the boards. Unlike the philosophers, these poets let the planets speak to them personally, refusing to lecture the world about its essential processes. Far too few thinking men have ever had the genuine courage or imaginative insight to follow this lyrical path." Hopkins tightened his grip on the cane he carried, wrinkling a heavy brow. "Lyricism and laxity. I was the youngest member of the Puritan Commission, and their rational instrument against the forces of exotic romanticism. The intellectual freedom you extol is but license to grasp the ungodly. What does truth need to know about omens or humour? Devil's work, sir. Fort sagaciously felt his moustache and crooned. How can the mystery of life be without laughter? We should delight in the flowering of creativity while rejecting every possible interpretation. Whose truth? First-hand experience is more valuable than third-hand explanation. The word unnatural makes no sense. If something happens in nature, it is then natural. Caliban could no longer contain himself and grumbled, "Neither of you understand witchcraft." They both looked at him with surprise. Neither of you. Before his unwelcome travelling companions could speak, Caliban continued. We worship the all-seeing eye of Mother Energy, burning in the messianic activities of her triangular sun, who constantly ascends back to his mother. For us he becomes incarnational flesh and phenomenon, tasting the knowledge that flesh alone knows. But he is still only her son. She is sovereign, the absolute I, observing herself in created things. Historically, our energetic religion once communicated in secret mystery cults of Eleusis, Corinth, and blessed Samothrace. When these centres of learning were suppressed, our wisdom was taught in the poetic colleges of Iceland and Denmark. "Can't hear you, mate." The cabbie looked confused. "What?" "I couldn't make out your novel directions. Don't ice my grill, big belly man. I needs my props." "Oh, sorry. Just talking to myself. Keep going." "Sorted." Both the witchfinder and the phrenologist disappeared in a thunderclap with an air of indignation. "Bloody hell, strange weather. Sounds like Jack Frost versus the Naked Chef. Oh yeah. Hope Chef Bit slapped his snowman and stuck the carrot up his fucking ass. Good job you got this cab." Caliban didn't say anything. He felt quiet and thoughtful, remembering that during the persecution we told the likes of Hopkins that our craft offered a magical perspective we would defend with our lives, because it burned with the immediacy of her being. Yet as a peculiar gnosis, our understanding all but flickered out in the public domain at the end of the 17th century. We were tired of the turbulence, turning instead to indirect communication and Hollywood. Wait till you see what I'm writing about at the moment. On balance, however, Fort was closer to our faith than he guessed, since nature's soul sent tokens to its lovers in weird, wonderful ways. Caliban recalled as a child seeing spectral balls of light in the night sky. They were crystal white in colour and seemed to be following him like expectant eyes overseeing his journey. One Lamastide, he shortly challenged one of these spheres to prove it was objective. Within moments, he was answered as this globe streaked ahead of him, leaving a brilliant trail behind it. A courting couple, kissing in nearby trees, shrieked with surprise as the vision's splendid vanished. Caliban nowadays simply felt excited and frustrated. Her ways were indeed hard to fathom. "Here we are, whack!" The cab stopped at the entrance to an impoverished grey stone building. "I've only got a tenner." "Sorted, me old mate." "Thanks." Caliban wondered how many more times that guy would say sorted in the next couple of hours. He got out and walked up to the church. Let's see how we're doing for time. Okay. I will read a few more poems in the last chapter because these things are only meant to go on for 40 minutes roughly. As I say, the idea in this particular book is, why do we write poetry and what are we trying to say? What did poetry do originally? It made actors on a stage say things with beauty. It's not the sort of language you use in everyday life. Through the course of the centuries, it became winged and it started flying to the stars until all these images were evolved and people understood them like a language. Nowadays, the Arts Council of London thinks poetry has to come from one-armed Jamaican lesbians, and if it's, yes, that's on camera, and if it's not that, then it's not poetry. They have a point, but it's not everything. Poetry is when the heart speaks honestly. Poetry is when the tongue wants to say a great truth which cannot be said in any other way. Most of these truths are dark truths because it's Caliban. Let me read this one. Only dark stars shine with love's real light in modern Anglo-Saxon times. Only misfit minds descend to true insight beneath green sepulchral vines. For the hellish depths in a human heart hold wonders more numerous than heaven's immense, or Asgard's sacred glory, or cold nirvanic bliss. Or such a soul as John Barleycorn, who is a serial being in nature's fertile design, never knew the purgation of partial harvesting, or the need to behave like Jesus, to become welcomed as the British Christ, himself crowned with once holy brambles above crushed but still sacrificial brows, that bleed their now poisonous loams upon enigmatic fields reduced to a factory floor. I'll go to the last section, the postscript. This is called a postscript to Valentine's because Caliban becomes a pagan saint at the end of the book. If there was more time, I'd explain what that meant, but maybe we can go through that during the question section. From the pen of Saint Caliban, both grace and mercy. Rainbow radiance has entered my head, revealing the goddess within me. Cum luce salutem. I have seen Our Lady Psyche, and found she wears innumerable masks. She is many, and she is one. Perhaps this is the very reason why I no longer believe that these strikingly different manifestations are of little or no consequence to Englishmen, since to us she is a stara, or the subjective side of matter. Each Easter we remember her miracle as new life comes out of death, and certainly without this sense of imminent orientation, only the deepest of cultural confusions can result. Therefore let me nail my ideological colours to the cathedral door from the beginning. I have travelled through the woods from being a mere pagan proselyte to become a heathen priest. In this vocational capacity, I recognise aspects of our goddess everywhere, perhaps particularly in my own people. And when I notice them in another poet, he or she becomes my own true Valentine. These Valentine verses are consequently written with the deepest reverence as literary keepsakes to my brothers and sisters in Gnosis, or in other words, as a nod to their potent spiritual influences upon my work. Certainly from the beginning of my journey, our heathen religious imagination reminded me that every flowering bud is a dew-drenched totem of desire and attraction, which is precisely why, along with the sages of old, I embrace everything that is sexually beautiful, albeit on the understanding that complex literary, religious and moral issues cannot or should not be avoided in society's name. Or put more succinctly, devalued by a literary establishment increasingly draconian, as well as intolerant towards any opinion not officially blessed by its own dubious sanction. All I ask is that careful literary pilgrims, with the more courteous disposition of honest inquiry, give their time to consider these Valentines, taking what they find to be just and leaving to the future any romantic assertion proving to be personally irrelevant or provocatively tangential for the present debate. This is where I've arrived in my individual search for poetry at the moment. It may not be my position in a decade from now, and it was certainly not my position 10 years ago. Yet it is clearly here that I stand at present, with all the questions as well as the quandaries this truly Wiccan, that's actually a Saxon word, truly Wiccan territory entails. I'm also mindful that heathen Valentines without context often cause religious chaos. Indeed, without decorated borders and skillfully laced boundaries, little but triviality results. One of the few pertinent lessons to be learnt from postmodern aesthetic techniques. Even if it was a lesson well known to our ancestors and exemplified in the art of ages past, it's really not new. Back then, student rhymers ascended through the poetic ranks as they wandered between different villages to remind their kinfolk about historically charged heroic acts. He was a great man, he was a good man, he defended us, you get the idea. While circulating news concerning current events when in the village I've just come from. The best of them secured positions performing at an aristocrat's house, thereby becoming richly rewarded for their talents. Bought off is the modern way of putting that. It goes without saying that such increasingly complex constructions demanded a powerful memory, and in the course of time various mnemonic devices emerged as memory aids. Embracing this innovation, the rhymesters themselves realised that the pristine beauty of their compositions was verbally raised to unexpected heights. These linguistic mechanisms were, therefore, eventually built into the verses themselves. The rhymesters were slowly becoming true poets. This is why oral origination, the oral origination thesis of poetic composition, needs to be re-examined every now and again, the argument asserts. Someone will speak with a natural lyricism. Maybe it only happens when a person is under pressure, or intoxicated, or suddenly inspired by the tragic significance of a single event. In the final analysis, however, these contingencies don't matter as much as the fact that there is a strange power in such obviously oracular utterances. They are quite literally moments of truth, or prophetic occasions, when we see into the fathomless heart of Psyche herself, being temporarily caught between the everything and the all, in a life made more aware that sexual relationships embody her beauty. Although impaling such moments as these into spoken texts became the curse as well as the blessing of the rhymers. Moreover, we are still surrounded by analogous instances of fetal wordplay on a daily basis, which either give us an insight into an individual's character. Have you noticed people are constantly joking with each other in offices? It says so much about who they are and what they are, much more than their position in the office. You can work out what a man is like. There was a sitcom a couple of years back called The Office. incredibly clever, brutal. The writer was a genius, quite obviously, because you could work out the sheer numbing stupidity of the situation they were all in, and because of that they revealed their true colours. Very, very clever. So I think wordplay happens on a daily basis, which either give us an insight into an individual character or reveal a previously hidden aesthetic value. It should thus come as no surprise that a peculiar authority is attributed to this uniquely human gift, a type of status recognised as holy, holy, holy by our forefathers, but usually seen as frightening, or merely a question of good education by ourselves. After all, most modern rhymers are introduced to poetry as a series of carefully organised lines on a blank page, or as memorised phrases performed for a reading. As such, contemporary rhymers are largely unaware that these magical moments transfigured the world of our ancestors, allowing them to find their rightful place in the ageless spirit circle as conquerors, farmers, or composers. I'll have to cut this down. In this radical way, a small but eroticised band of highly literate witches can, at long last, re-emerge into public view, protected by the hallowed sanctity of tradition and the deep initiatory knowledge that female metaphors are more appropriate when trying to frame questions of divine realities. Something that's caught my attention, there's a big row going on in Russia at the moment. There was a group of Russian lesbian singers, I believe, who bared their breasts in an Orthodox cathedral. Wonderful publicity. Unfortunately, politics in certain parts of the world is moving even more quickly than here at the moment. They're all in jail at the moment. I wrote the a review of one of his books. Now wants them all tried for murder. What murder they've actually committed, I'm not sure. But it's getting really worrying. Okay, we have to guard freedom at every single moment. Right? It's not theoretical. It's in our lives now. So, what they were saying is what I was talking about actually years ago. If you want to talk about God, higher consciousness, the above thing, it always seems better with female language. You know, God is fertile, fecund, creative, productive. That's a woman. That's woman's language. So I think that just makes more sense. Our ancestors thought that too, which is why most Western poetry always ends up idolising the woman. Always. Even in Dante, it's Beatrice that actually takes the place of God. It's a long story. Yes, the study and interpretation of these skin-tight documents must remain in heathen hands alone. Only then can our meta-languages weave new sources of belonging, my dearly beloved. As I have now joined such rarefied ranks, finding thereby freedom in perfect service, while remaining Caliban in clover. May I finally testify that I am lying on the ground because I am Caliban. Because I am Caliban, I am drunk. He was always drunk. Drunk with the wine of a hidden godhead. A wine bibber with an upturned bowl. Upturned but still to be replenished. Replenished by the blessings of the saints. I'm lying on the ground because I am short. Short but dressed in a gown of grey, a gown that hides a poet's gospel, gospel news given by a hunted fox, hunted yet unafraid in the knowledge that an angel is ascending. I am lying on the ground because of a giant, A giant of fire who sits on a throne, his throne reveals this authority divine, authority given to a celestial spirit, celestial and not of the solid world, solid like a chalice, crossed in suffering. I'm lying on the ground because I am hungry. Hungry, although every day I am fed by a fish that appears in a pond like Bethesda, inspired by a breath, the breath of a promise, bringing health in its quenching. Promise and fulfillment beyond any expectation. I'm lying on the ground because I am praying. Praying to the stars for their singular kindness. A kindness that allowed the love born of ashes. Ashes whose embers, like better roads to travel, light and enlighten the tongue and the spine. The spine of a man seeking wisdom in words. And at that point, I think we'll stop. Thank you for coming.
David, thank you.